Okay, let's pray. Holy God, we thank you for this day and the ways that we're able to connect one to another, for the conversations that we've had, for the lectures that we've heard, for the book that we have read that gives light into the history of this country in ways that we see repeated over and over. We pray that your Spirit will guide us into a hopeful future, to be reminded that you have created us for peace and hope and justice in relationship one to another. Guide us in this discussion today as we wrap up this study, and enlighten us for what is next for us, that we can continue to learn and grow. We pray all this in your many holy names. Amen.
Amen. Okay, first I want to say how much I have loved all of you participating in this and bringing your opinions and your insights into this. I have thoroughly enjoyed this, and I hope whatever book we choose next that you'll come back. Of course, the next book is 2 weeks from today, A Weary World, and it's an Advent study. So everybody's welcome to that. There we go. And then on the next one, I hope to get enough suggestions that we can have a little survey that you guys could fill out. My idea of doing this, I wanted to do this book first, because it was so long. Let's do the hardest thing first. And then pick out groups to read other books on, like, I have, a bunch of us have voluminous amounts of Black history books, but then I was thinking of Asian history and Native American history and whatever else, Irish history, I don't know. There's just different things that we could do. So be thinking of that, please. Okay, now we've talked about Zen being biased, and I love this chapter. He goes, yes, I was biased. And so I want you to think about how he was biased and why he felt he had to do that. And was his approach persuasive to you guys? So let's go through quick and just say, talk about his bias, which is at the beginning of the chapter on the first page. And I can't find it, but I know it's there. There it is on your page 631. I have a different book. So it says the title of this chapter is not a prediction, but a hope, which he's going to explain. And he thinks the title for the book was inadequate because he couldn't really get all the people, but he got a bunch, a bunch of the groups. And he wanted to call it that anyway because of, with all its limitations. And he specifically wrote a history disrespectful of government and respectful of people's movements of resistance. So do we have any comments on his bias or that statement?
You're muted.
He was basically saying that he was biased, but he was making up for the flip bias that most of the history books are so much focused on the government and the presidents and stuff that he felt like he had to be biased completely in the other direction to balance the scales.
Yes, he did say that. I liked his imagery of standing on a tower of books that leaned way far the opposite way of him. I liked that imagery. Okay, how was it persuasive with you? This is just personal opinion, no right or wrong answer. Just talk to me about, did he persuade you to look at history differently?
He brought up a lot of things that you just don't hear about, that you don't realize has been a part of our history. So I was really fascinated with a lot of the things that we learned in that book. Katya?
Well, I think his bias is way overdue. It really spoke to me because I think even before I started reading this book, with everything I'd read prior to this, I read the interview with him in the back of my book, and someone is asking him about being a radical historian and whether or not he agrees with the title. And he says, yes, I am a radical, which means like radical means going back to the roots, you know, and that's kind of how I've been lately defining myself. I'm kind of in this defiant mode. Defiant to, you know, the status quo, like as change is way overdue. So it really, really spoke to me. And I agree with him when he says that, you know, our history encourages impotency among citizens because the machine seems to be so big and unconquerable. And I think that's what his mission is, to emphasize that you know, that people can create change.
Lori?
I think somewhere in the book it mentions something about cost benefit. It seems like most of history books are going into the benefits, you know, the things that happened, the discoveries that were made, inventions that were made, all the, you know, moving progress that's made. This book goes more into the cost of all of those things that happened, which is a really different way of looking at it, I think.
Both good insights.
Ted?
Well, as a person who was deeply influenced and involved with the folk song protest movement, actually helped organize an NAACP chapter in Georgia in 1968, etc. I did not find him that far out of focus of what I know of history. Sure, he's biased, and it was nice to see the presentation. But I personally feel that, well, for one thing, he did not give adequate emphasis, in my understanding, to the amount of people who changed in the 60s and early 70s, but still sort of kept a lid on their lives, but still the drive for change never left. And I think this is something which is missed in here. I also feel that at times he sort of overstated, and there were, like in the next chapter, he blames Clinton for some of the Waco problems, and that was a screw up by lesser entities than Clinton himself, to be honest about it. So I know, but anyway, it was incomplete in this sense. He's a historian that is selective, like all historians are, only he's picking a side we commonly do not hear, but it's still there and known for those of us that lived through some of the cultural shifts of the 60s.
Yeah.
Do you think the 60s enthusiasm, shall we say, has been quenched since then?
Matured perhaps, rather than quenched.
Sure.
It's still there.
No, I think we still see it.
Okay.
And I think what we're seeing in this last election and the progressive Democrats is definitely still part of that.
I'm still confused how a man, number 45, was able to get in. I'm still confused.
Yeah, you and me both.
But look at all of the lily white private schools in the country, many of which refuse to teach evolution, etc. We have a strong element in our society, an underground element that he has appealed to, that we have sort of ignored because they have basically denied science, denied progress, and wanted to go. I loaned or gave to Dawn at Helen LaCate's birthday shindig a item from the separation of church and state that describes this Christian nationalism as an attempt to go back to the 50s, where women were under their husband's thumb, and you can just take it from there. And this is a minority in the country, but it's a very scared minority. It's a big minority, and they're very scared of the future as we become even more of a majority minority country. Living in New Mexico, we have to adapt to this. I'm Anglo and I'm minority here, and I know it. But the much of the country is literally terrified of this cultural change of where everybody is a minority of some kind or another.
Well, and I think a lot of what brought the current occupant of the White House in is the white lash back, reacting to a Black president, and they could not stand it. And so this is the response, is to go the other extreme and select someone who rails against anything but his own wealthy white base. Katya?
Against immigration and
I think that's part of the picture, but I think the picture is more complex than that. I mean, one thing Trump did well was capture the feeling of the people who were powerless. We talked about civility last time, and like earlier this week, I saw an article on Common Dreams that says that was titled "You Can't Eat Civility," and I think for the most part here, we here kind of represent what Zen calls the guards, in terms of we have some privilege to, where we're still doing okay. But I think the needs of the people who are kind of at the bottom of the system have been ignored for such a long time. I mean, they've seen themselves and generations and their families just kind of going downhill and losing, more of the income, more of the power, more of their towns, more of their communities. And it appears that no matter who was elected, be that a Republican or a Democrat, their lives really didn't get any better. And so what Trump captured is this kind of, revolt against the establishment. It's just, we talk about how in education, how affective comes before the cognitive. That anger was primary. He captured the spirit. I mean, no, he for sure, he's just really good at using things. I mean, he doesn't have that pain. He's the elite. But I just think there are multiple components, and I feel it's always easier to blame, to point your finger at something concrete or at someone concrete and say, see, it's the African Americans who are taking away, from you through affirmative action, or you can say, oh, it's the immigrants. And so this is easier to understand than actually explaining to people how it's the system that is in place, that is, systematically, in a very intentional manner, making their lives harder and harder.
Nita, you're muted. Nita, you're muted.
Nita.
being a child of the 50s and 60s and growing up before women had freedom that they have now, I
think we're losing her connection.
Nita?
And
I think one of the themes in the book. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nita.
60s.
Nita, go ahead. You're going in and out.
A woman, a girl in the. Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
well,
it's working now.
It's about growing up before women had it's about growing up before women had the freedom that they have now. And I think a big part of that was the development of the birth control pill that freed women up. But if you grew up in the 50s and the 60s, women had no power at all, basically. And so I think this is a step forward in that. I mean, in the same way, it's an evolution of freedom that, and people have railed against that too. They're saying it's just horrible that women do what they do now. But you see, that's, anyway.
Anne?
I'm through.
To kind of build on a couple of comments people made, I think one of the themes in this book that I learned a lot from was the impact of economics on people's lives and how money was power and it kept a lot of people submissive. Someone asked, I think Lisa asked, someone had brought up about the current president. And I think he might have been elected for a lot of reasons, and I don't really understand, but I think some of it was he emboldened people who maybe felt threatened by an African-American president to go back to a traditional white male president. And I think some of it was he could appeal to people like, I can make your lives better if you're struggling, you don't have economic success. He made promises. And I think maybe to build on what Nita said, he might have also appealed to some people who were threatened with women's right to have abortions, that maybe there's a religious group that maybe I need to edit myself. I almost said that know how to read and think, but they are very traditional, and that even though they don't support perhaps all of his policies, that's the one issue that they're firm on. I don't know, but it is puzzling how he seems to foster separation in the country and the permission to be hateful to other people that are different.
Very good points.
I think he's just a good con man. And for people who maybe felt underrepresented, not recognized, he was able to word his speeches to make promises that made them feel like he would represent them. And he was very good at making those kind of empty promises and getting support when he had a totally different agenda in his mind the whole time.
And there's that. Jennifer?
You're muted.
One of the things that we've noticed of the people we know that are strong Trump supporters is that if people feel like they have not been respected, and then they see how Trump's been maligned or not respected enough as president, or whatever that means, they identify with him. Like, they're not respecting Trump just like they don't respect me. And I deserve respect, so does he. So he did a good job convincing people that he's like them, but it's all about reaching out to people who feel marginalized or disrespected some way, somehow. And I can only explain it sort of like my cousins in Pennsylvania are low income, marginalized. One of my cousin's husband is an ex-convict who can't get a job. They're in a biker gang and things like that. And they feel like society criticizes them, but Trump doesn't. And so they support Trump. That's best I can explain.
Well, Hillary Clinton shot herself in the foot when she called people like that the deplorables.
Ryan?
I think that was the turning point where people went, oh, really? Well, watch this. So that was, to me, that was very disheartening for her to say something ugly like that.
I tried to address that explicitly in my sermon this morning about the Beatitudes. Right? I said,
Right.
If you feel like you've been hated, excluded, reviled, and defamed, then you might think that Jesus says you're blessed. But it's not a matter of people saying things that hurt your feelings. It's a matter of whether you are being called to account because you're a person with power, or you're being cast down because you're a person without power.
Right.
Jesus made a very clear distinction between them. But I think a lot of people will point to those very few verses and say, you're saying mean stuff about me, so Jesus must love me and I'm right.
Yeah. Okay, I want to change the conversation just a moment. What do you guys picture with his 1% against the 99% of the rest of us that are turning against each other so the 1% can stay? What does that bring to your mind?
Well, the 1% does a good job of pitting everybody against each other so that we feel like that each other is the enemy.
Right.
And that is how they maintain control, is they keep the poor and the marginalized and the people everyone against each other, and then they can look to those leaders to fix it for them. And that's how the 1% hangs on to their power. Ted?
This has been a Southern political theory and practice since the Civil War, of playing the poor white off against the black, and the 1% that has the money has run off with everything. We clearly saw that while we were living in Georgia, and it's a tool that has now gone nationwide in terms of playing the minorities off against each other. So there's one relatively well-hooked group can walk off with all the marbles. And this really hasn't changed. For instance, we got all the garbage about how much we're going to save out of the Trump tax cut. I got a couple $100, but the wealthy got millions out of the tax cut. So, the explanation of how it actually applies, many of those who were and are Trump supporters got nothing out of that tax cut, but they bought in that it was a better society, even though they were essentially disadvantaged through it.
Yeah.
Nita?
Yeah, I almost forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I think this is exactly the wedge that Trump was able to drive into. Well, it wasn't just Trump, but the wedge that was the Republicans put into Christianity, of saying, this is our Christianity, and there's no other Christianity but the one that we believe. And even though it's not very Christian, it's still a Christianity that these people say, oh, this is the only Christianity is worth anything. And so that again is driving that wedge into a big voting bloc. And it's getting rid of a lot of the Christians if they do that, if they're able to do that. The evangelicals go one way and the remaining Christians go another way, or another side of it.
Anne?
I think that's absolutely right, Nita. And I think there's some devoted Christians who believe the world was literally created in 7 days. And the discounting of science is a problem. And then there's the language that can be a problem also. I think in the book they said, if you ask people if they're in favor of socialization or welfare, they'll say no. But if you ask people, do you feel we have a moral obligation to help the needy or the poor? And people will say yes. So I don't know. One thing that's been troubling to me the last 4 years is things are said that are not true, that I know for sure are not true, but it's accepted as truth. And then I guess it has to do with the power of language too, how it can be manipulated to convince people one way or another. And yeah, and you shouldn't inject bleach. I think that's bad.
Lori?
I think that in terms of welfare or helping people, part of the difference is people see welfare as something that the government does, and they don't like big government, but helping people is a different thing that doesn't necessarily involve the government. And I think that's a different way of looking at things too.
Dave?
I think some of the things we're talking about here, I commonly call dog whistles. And I think Mr. Trump is an expert at using dog whistles. And you know, it's funny because we're talking about all this stuff and about why he got more votes, but he didn't get more votes, as you recall. Actually, he lost the popular vote. So
He means the last election, not this one, the last one.
I'm talking about against Hillary, and yet that very cleverly designed way of gaming the system called the Electoral College put him in office. So you know, I don't know about what things he did or what things somebody else did or didn't do or whatever. He got outvoted by the majority of the people, but he's in the office anyway.
He likes to be the biggest, the first, the greatest, the hugest, and all of that. And he's now going to go down in history as the only president who has lost the popular vote twice.
Sounds like a Texan to me.
Yes.
Yes, I agree.
Not this. Hey, I said this morning, I am New Mexican. I just got here late.
Yes, exactly. And it feels a lot better, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Katya?
It does. I mean, yeah.
Ken has
I
his
played
hand
that. I drank that Kool-Aid for a while too.
Katya, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I personally don't see Trump like as just a person there by himself. You know, he's one of the many. He's a good representation. I mean, he's certainly like a very vivid, very, you know, bold representation of the bigger disease on society. But he also, and this is very unfortunate, kind of captured the anti-government feeling, which is very dangerous because it plays in favor of, you know, the corporations that are already like running everything in this country, but ultimately, you know, something, I don't know that Reagan started it. I think he just put a good like label on it, but it's sort of like, well, the government is there just to take away from you and to obstruct your freedom. And that is very dangerous because, and that's working because people haven't seen the government like tangibly changing their lives for the better for a long time. And so they are buying into this whole idea, because if there's no government, then it all goes directly into the hands of corporations, and you know, then we have no regulations. Money rules all, which to me is just I don't know. That's even worse than what we have now.
Yeah, Ken?
Thank you. We were talking about how the 99% are turned against each other in a kind of class warfare, other thing. And I think a lot of what's contributed to that is the advent of social media and the popularity of social media. It's a two-edged sword, you know. For me, social media provides the most instantaneous news about what's going on in the world. But on the other hand, there's that comment section, and any posting can quickly devolve into criticism, hateful comments, and I confess I get sucked into it, but that's provided the perfect soup or the perfect media for that kind of thing to perpetuate.
And not to play devil's advocate, but I think sometimes the media now during the pandemic maybe is beneficial. We learned about George Floyd, and I think that horrified so many people that maybe people are more aware of a benefit they have that other people don't have. This morning we saw, I think it was on CBS Morning News with Jane Pauley, they showed an image of, it looked like a parking lot, but it was cars waiting to get food in San Antonio. And it was horrible. It was just all these cars and all these people that were desperately waiting to get food. And it makes you think, Katya brought up, well, we're the guard. Most of us have enough food for we're okay for next couple days. But there are some families that are just barely hanging on. So maybe, I don't know if anything will change, but I think with the pandemic, there's going to be economic repercussions for years for some of these families to try to regain what they've lost in their security.
Okay, it's about time to change. I would just like to say one more thing that I feel super strongly about, because I don't like the way we say it. I believe in abortion. I don't believe in abortion, but I do believe in a woman's choice to make her own choices. But I still think abortion is really sad. But the thing that makes me angry is that these people decry, they want the sanctity of human life. And then they can watch what was his name, Ann? George, the one that you just said, the guy that got killed on the...
George Floyd?
Floyd. I keep wanting to say Foreman. George Floyd. If I know George Foreman, whatever.
Yeah.
To me, the sanctity of life has to be for everybody, not just little white babies. And I think the sanctity of life should be for little white babies too. But to me, when they use that, the sanctity of life, I'm going, well, what about George? He was a life. So anyway, that's, to me, the sanctity of life goes a whole lot farther than abortion. And Eleanor, it's your turn.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to follow up on that and point out that those who are against abortion and against birth control are the last people that were willing to give you programs to help when a baby arrives. What do? They don't
Exactly.
want to give you the support,
They're pro-birth, not pro-life.
Contradiction. Yeah. If you're really pro-life, a group of nuns actually came out with about a year ago with a write-up saying that they're not pro-abortion, but they were pointing this very fact out, that being pro-life means you're pro-life, just like you're saying.
Right.
It means you help people when they have a baby or don't get an abortion, but rather carry a baby to
pro-life until birth.
And these people that are so gung-ho anti-abortion are the ones that are not providing. They don't even want to provide help. I guess that's what I see is the real problem.
Katya?
I agree.
Well, I don't know if my comment on the chat was clear. I mean, the argument is so inconsistent because a lot of the times these are also the people who are, heralding the dangers of the big government that is going to take your freedoms away from you. And then it's like, well, how is this not the big government who doesn't even let you decide what you do with your body. It is such a, like, just such a convoluted, inconsistent argument, but it seems like today, like, logic doesn't matter anymore. It's like whatever works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that brings up the
Yeah.
also brings up the argument of the death penalty. If you're pro-life, then how can you support the death penalty? But ask most of these they're not really anti-abortion, they're pro-birth and an anti-choice, and so then they want to take the choice away from people and put them to death as if two wrongs make a right and brings anybody back. Lori, were you getting in?
Well, I was just going to say that, yeah, not even necessarily through the legal proceedings. You have these vigilantes, they're willing to take a life without even any court procedures or anything like that.
And then they bomb the abortion centers and stalk the doctors and people that go in there. It's just abhorrent. Ted?
Part of this discussion gets into Clinton's welfare reforms.
Yeah, I was going to go there.
I was working welfare at the time this came in, and the ability to put these women on Medicaid and have medical coverage they never had before produced some real interesting results. I remember one client that came in and couldn't wait to show me her birth implant and the upper arm, that she had her fertility under control. She was so proud and happy the first time in her life she could control her body. And this was a reaction of a lot of these women. Faculty, we talked about the underclass bit. I had in the 17 years, at least 4 or 5 of these welfare mothers who went to work off of welfare directly for a higher paying job than what I was receiving. The successes were out there. There's no question about it. Maybe not as many as we'd like to see, but it was happening and still is. It's a quandary with those that are raised in this anti-fertility control background to make the shift. But the number that I saw that were bootstrapping themselves, some completed it, some had not yet, but were clearly on the road, was really incredible, a significant percentage.
Okay, this leads us into the Clinton era. We need to talk about Clinton and Bush some. So I guess my first question is, Clinton is close enough to most of us now that we can remember what he was like. So my first question is, what is your impression of him as a president overall? Dave?
Unmute.
Well, I think Clinton really kind of had the good of the country and its people in his mind. And I think, it was remarkable, the difference between what we got right now. Anyway, but I think I really think that he had it on. Of course, he had a little problem that somebody took advantage of and kind of screwed things up. But, Pat and Laurie and I talk about compassion all the time. I think he had true compassion. And for the people. I really do.
Any other comments?
For me, he's just an immoral man who was a great president. I agree with Dave that I think he had the country's best wishes in mind and the best of the common good. And he really worked hard, and Hillary worked on healthcare, and they really did try to put the country first. But he was, and I don't know how he is now, but he was abhorrently immoral.
Well, I don't know if I'd even agree with that, abhorrently.
I think he was.
He had feet of clay, for sure.
Well, and it started,
Well,
it wasn't even just in the White House. It was back in Arkansas. So, I mean,
Oh,
this
I
was a
know.
long
Yeah.
history. This was a long history of power,
Yeah.
men, white men in
Big
power,
power.
using their power over women. And that's what we have in the White House today too. Different kind of person altogether though.
Well, Lisa,
I just have that quiet feeling when I think of when the Republicans tried to kick him out of office. And basically we just had that one event where he couldn't keep his pants zipped.
He lied to Congress, I think was the
Oh, he
charge.
lied.
Wasn't
That was the thing, he lied.
yeah,
But look at the man that's here now that has paid off prostitute after prostitute and said horrible things about women. And to compare those two, just like, are you kidding me? That's how I felt. Are you kidding me?
It's a whole different world, isn't it?
It's completely different. So thank you.
Ted?
This has been a long history with the type of personalities which become presidents. FDR's lover was with him when he had his stroke. Eisenhower.
Not Obama. That is an upstanding integrity.
Well,
White
Harry
House.
Truman and Carter were above reproach, but that is about it since the 1930 in terms of ethics, sexual ethics in the White House, because this seems to attract this type of person. And you can go on and on and on historically. Like I say, Eisenhower's lady who drove him around, his chauffeur in his big Cadillac limousine, was also a bedmate, which of course his wife knew. This goes on and on and on, you know. I think Clinton gets blamed for stuff that's not of major importance to the security of the country. But part of the problem, and I tried to share that in my lecture, is that as a Southerner, he had some of the same Southern attitudes towards incarceration and towards the levels of society, which in general, Zen is very opposed to. And therefore, I don't think he got fair treatment from Zen.
Okay. Linda?
Yeah, times have changed because back when the Kennedys were in the White House, nobody ever took a picture and published it of Jacqueline Kennedy smoking. And she was a smoker. And it's not that they couldn't have gotten a picture of it, but there was no way that that was ever going to be shown to the American public. And today, everything is out there.
That's true. Anne?
Not to go too much, but the book, the author, I think he was really harsh on Jimmy Carter as a president when in the last chapters, that he was very much under big business's control. And I don't know if I just was unaware of all that, because I thought he was I guess now he's such a good man building homes and things for Habitat and Humanity. I never really thought of him in those terms. So I think maybe, I don't know, time will tell, or maybe I just don't know enough about Jimmy Carter, but I thought when someone brought him up, it just came to mind.
Katya?
Well, I think you can be a good man. I mean, actually, I can't remember Jimmy Carter. Recently, I heard that he is like the only one out of all the like 20th century presidents who's still living like a very modest life, like not like Obama, who lives in a $12 million mansion, you know. I mean, again, like something has to be said. I mean, we have a supposedly progressive president who lives in a $12 million mansion. I mean, how much farther away from the people can you get? But I think takes a lot of courage and it takes a lot of political will. And it definitely takes a coalition to get to the White House and not to, start dancing to the tunes of the lobbyists and corporations. I mean, I think you may be running with good intentions, but then it seems like very quickly presidents, sort of become part of the system. And I think this is where the active base, comes absolutely critical, like people pushing, like when Obama got elected, he kind of disowned his base a little and said, okay, now I'm the adult in the room and I'm gonna, deal with it. And that's why so many people actually, kind of lost or gave up on their support for him, and because of the appointments to the cabinet positions. But it's like one person cannot make change. Only like millions and millions of people can make change, because the system is never going to give up that easily.
Okay, we're going to run out of time here, so I'm going to go jumping up to Bush.
Well, I do want to make one statement about Jimmy Carter. He is not living modestly. He is wealthy. He has like a $10 million net worth. His peanut farm corporation, family owned, was wealthy. And so he's a great guy. And I really think he's probably one of the best ex-presidents we've ever had. But he is wealthy.
I'd even vote him for the best myself.
Yeah, he wasn't the greatest. He wasn't the greatest president, but he's probably our greatest ex-president. Very much a man of character. Yeah.
I really think a lot of Carter.
I do too. Ted.
The one that was really poor when he left the White House was Harry Truman. They retired in the home which his wife's parents had, and it was at that time that Congress increased the retirement funds for presidents, because Truman himself had no wealth background at all. And talk about a humble man in the White House, he would also have to be included in that list.
Yeah. Yeah, he was a haberdasher before.
And they didn't have the book deals waiting in the wings like we do today. Ellen, go ahead.
Okay, so Bush is a whole nother issue. That's when we have 9/11, and that just happened 9 months after he was elected president, appointed president by the Supreme Court. If you want to talk about that, they have a bunch of questions about that election. I'm not going to go there. It ended up that I think Gore got the majority of votes, but here again, the Supreme Court decided Bush got the election by 527 votes or something in Florida. Anyway, that was very upsetting to a lot of us. So, but let's not go there. Let's talk
that's Texas' gift to the United States, was George Bush.
Yeah, I saw a bumper.
We didn't want him as governor anymore.
I saw a bumper sticker while he was president that said, "Some town in Texas is missing its idiot."
See, now Bush is another one that I think is a man of integrity. I think he is a moral, upstanding person. I just completely disagree with his policies, but he's, I think, a decent man, and Laura especially.
So what do you think about his economic policy and his war policy? Yeah, Dave.
My question is, was he the one really making the decisions, or was it Carl Rove and Dick Cheney?
I wondered that at the time. Cheney. I felt like Cheney was behind his decisions.
I think he's a decent guy. I think he's a pretty nice guy. He got in the presidency by what I call gaming the system, which,
Go ahead,
they-
Dave.
We can't
They
hear you.
gamed the system, and I don't think it was him. Of course, his brother was the governor of Florida, but I think he was a decent guy, and I think he still is, and I think he shows it in things that he says and does now. But I don't think I thought he was a really rotten SOB until I realized that it was Karl Rove and Dick Cheney who were really
those two were behind it. So since 9/11, we all have a whole different thing. We got into the war in Afghanistan, and we're still there. I feel like this is still up-to-date history. And so my question involved here is every war a war against children? We have been at war forever. Somalia, Kosovo, all these wars are talked about by Zen. Who gets hurt the most? It's
Civilians.
The kids and women.
Children.
Yeah. Laura.
Children and the women.
I agree with that. And yet, since Vietnam War has changed to the extent that these days you don't know who exactly your enemy is. You don't know who's going to blow you up. You don't know who's got the bomb. It could be a 10-year-old child. It could be a prostitute, with the troops. You just really don't know who's going to do it. And that changes the whole face of war, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember in Vietnam when they talked about that you had to be aware of women and children possibly going to blow you up.
Well, and then we have this, what I think is the unethical aspect of war today, where you don't even have to set eyes on your target. They do it by computers. They do it from a distance. They mass murder whole civilian towns looking for one person or a group of people. I just find that just completely unethical and not even close to a just war argument.
Yeah.
Ted?
Well, there's a bit of history here too. The last outside conqueror to successfully conquer Afghanistan was Alexander the Great. So we ought to be aware of the fact that this is a difficult situation, no matter what the country is that tries to meddle in it.
And Alexander the Great died in 332 BCE. So,
well, and that's been part of my problem with Bush is his administration stirred up a hornet's nest, got into a part of the world trying to convince them and force them down the throat of democracy, not having any clue the history or the culture or anything about the people that his administration went in and destroyed. And Iraq is a whole nother conversation of going in to Iraq and murdering their leader that we helped to put in power. So it's all important to me.
Yeah, there's Brother Ryan.
Ryan, go ahead.
I'm going to riff on a speech that I won't quote from Doctor Who, but war is essentially the goal is to terrorize and oppress the people who disagree with you so much that when you sit down at the table to talk, which you'll have to do eventually anyway, if any of them still exist, that they will give you anything to make the terror and violence and oppression stop. We don't have to go to war if we see humanity as united, as one people, as people who are like us. And if we take care of the needs, then there won't be these huge explosions of disagreement that call for us to go kill people. And the fact is, it's not us going to kill people. You said it's a war against children. Every war is a war against our own children. We pick the young people who are poor from our own children to go kill other people's children, so that the people who are wealthy and sitting at the top don't have to go sit down and talk about things like adults.
Yeah, there's a lot of the songs coming out of the Vietnam era. Johnny, I Hardly Knew You, sung to the same tune as Johnny, It Comes Marching Home. It was about a guy coming back from war with no, having an arm and you haven't a leg. You're a worthless shell of a man on a peg. You know, that's the way it seems like, you know, when you send your own kids to war and they come back like that, and you're doing this to other people too. Well, I want to kind of sum up the book. I'd like your opinion on what you think of this approach to history. You all think it's
Betsy?
Yeah, there's Betsy. You got to
You're
unmute.
muted.
Unmute. Betsy, unmute.
I'm there. Sorry,
She's
I was
trying.
having technical difficulties. Well, I think what
I'm going to leave.
Pardon?
You gone?
No, I'm here.
Yeah,
No, Nita,
it's just
Nita.
too unstable.
Oh, okay. Bye, Nita.
I think this book, in the very last sentence, I really thought made an impact. It says, thus the future of democracy depended on the people and their growing consciousness of what was the decent way to relate to their fellow human beings all over the world. If we just treat each other like human beings and we're all alike, we might speak different languages, we might look different, we might live in different kind of settings, but we're all human beings. That sums it up for me. We got to treat each other like you would want to be treated. Just kind of like Ryan said.
Yes, like Ryan said this morning.
Yeah,
Lisa.
I just have this final thought on this book. And I don't know if any of you had that chapter 25, the 2000 election and the war on terrorism. And one quote from it said, it should have been obvious to Bush and his advisors that terrorism could not be defeated by force. And it made me think of prisoners and all the things our country does, that we're going to beat you into submission. And then he gets up and we're Americans and we're good. And I'm thinking, no, we're not. We're bad. Because in our prison system, how do we try to take care? Terrible punishment, and it doesn't work. And all these things, to me, it goes back to Martin Luther King. You got to do nonviolent things to help reform people and to reform the country. And I just had one last question, if people don't mind going over just a little bit. How can we assist Biden so that he doesn't become one of these guys that Zin could talk about negatively? Are there things that we can do to help him?
Katya?
I don't know that I would use the verb assist, because reading in the news the last couple of weeks has been pretty discouraging if you're looking at whom he's appointing or considering for the appointments. And it seems like, it's all the same. Like already all kinds of progressive organizations are denouncing him for, choosing like the lobbyists and the big oil people for different positions. So I don't know that I want to assist. I love the term that Zin used. It's not his. I think it came from one of the journalists, the permanent adversarial culture. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, I feel like I'm part of the permanent adversarial culture, adversarial to the status quo, and I think we need to hold his feet to the fire. That's what needs to happen, and not assist, because he made it very clear even when he was running. I mean, he spent more time courting Republicans. He denounced like right away all of the progressive organizations and the socialism, and promised that he would veto Medicare for all and the like. So I don't feel like assisting him, because assisting him would be supporting these kind of ideas. I feel more like holding his feet to the fire in whichever way possible.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of taking, our government is by the people, for the people. And I think we have to take more ownership in it instead of abdicating to some people in Washington that we can then blame for everything. We have to take more ownership in like Katya is saying, holding their feet to the fire, but also coming out and denouncing what is wrong in this country and standing up for what is right in a very intentional and vocal and in-person presence, because it all begins with the people who have elected the people in power, is to hold them accountable. Ryan.
It's interesting that Katya used the term permanent adversarial culture. I think I've shared this before, but it really resonated with me that an election is not picking somebody whose policies are right in line with yours. It's picking your adversary for the job of accountability. You're choosing the person who will be most likely to listen and hear arguments for your case. You know, and I think, but community organizing, they say there are no permanent adversaries and no permanent allies, right? There's people who, for the moment, are aligned with your interests, and at any other time or any other issue, might need to be held accountable to move in the direction that's supporting people in need. So it's staying agile. It's not becoming complacent. It's continuing to use the networks that we've built to communicate with people who are in a position to amplify and make a difference.
Okay. Jennifer?
Well, bringing it kind of local to Lisa's question, I know that Deb Haaland is being considered for the cabinet in the Department of Interior. And, you know, I had someone say, well, that's not good because the only reason he's considering her is because she's an Indian woman and not because of her qualifications. And I would just like to dispute that, because she has a law degree in Indian law. She was a tribal administrator for a few years. She has a lot of relevant experience and she's intelligent. And on top of that, it's about time that somebody who is a Native American has influence in that department. And that is a qualification. And so I think that supporting that, even though it means we have to give up who we just elected to Congress, it does help hold the government accountable to reflect the diversity of our country, and in that position to, you know, appoint somebody who's invested on a personal level in the outcome. So that would be one thing we could do, is support that.
Yeah.
Even though I like Tom Udall too, but, you know, maybe she can hire him to be in charge of conservation or something.
There you go. That's a good one. Ted?
Well, a factor in this too is that, as we know, Biden has had a lot of grief and sorrow in his family that's brought him low. Deb Haaland is a recovering alcoholic. FDR had polio. A number of the outstanding people. Lincoln had a bruising defeat by Douglas in the Senate race after the debates. A number of the best of those who have served the country have been those that have failures of one kind or another in their background and have learned humility. And I think this is going to be a significant factor in the coming administration.
Well, and even Sanders is coming out and saying that his appointment so far is, if he doesn't appoint more progressive, more liberal cabinet members, then it's really kind of a slap in the face to those who were Bernie supporters and wanting more of a liberal representation. So Biden has a lot of work to do to balance things, to be
he's got
the
to fight with
president for the American people that he says he wants to be, not just a certain base.
Yeah. Okay.
Lisa?
Okay. I really want you to all come back and do another book study with us. So I'm going to give you my email address, and if you will send me names of books that you would like to study, and also names of movies, or I thought of a third thing and now I forgot it, of things that have to do with this. And then I won't do it, but I could get maybe somebody to build a survey monkey. We still have that, or something, and you all can vote. Okay, so here's
the ones that have already emailed me book name possibilities. I've put in the email today with the Zoom link, so you can look at those.
Okay. So can you read that? I don't know. My email. Nope. Okay, let me just say it.
Type it in the chat.
Okay.
I think we have it.
We have it.
Yeah.
You want me to just type it in the chat for you?
Yeah, would you just type it, because I just tried and it's MLK, and that's not Martin Luther King. It's Michael, Lisa, and Keelan. MLKOR@earthlink.net.
Okay.
I just want to make a comment on this book I put in the chat. I've already read it, but it's such a great read. It came out, I don't know if you've heard of Naomi Klein. She's a Canadian, she's a professor of, I'm sorry, I can't remember what, but this book is great. It came out after the 2016 presidential election, and she does such a great job explaining how the phenomenon of Trump became possible. And she really makes a great analysis of like our whole culture, and how like even what we see on TV and this whole television of, you know, entertainment and sort of circus, right? Bread and circus, where there's no bread, but there's circus, you know, made the election of someone like Trump possible. But she also talks a lot about, you know, the possible resistance and like what can be done, you know, and she's saying just disagreeing, just saying no is not enough anymore. You know, it's not enough to just say like, well, I just disagree, or he's not my president. It is also like a great read. Like it's really an easy, highly accessible. She specifically wrote it in that kind of language, so a lot of people would read it.
Okay.
Okay, would you also put online to all of us when the next social justice committee, the next time the social justice committee will meet? Would you put that there, please, Don?
We don't have a date scheduled yet, but
well, whenever you get one, yeah.
Sure.
It'll go in the newsletter, so check that out.
We'll also send it in the reminders email too. So as soon as we have a date and time. I sent the last meeting, I sent the link out to the whole church hoping to get more interest, but we didn't get more interest. Maybe we can now have more participation, because there's a lot in the world around that needs attention and social justice for sure.
I just think anybody who's been part of this book study would probably like it. So all of you guys should come.
That's right. It's sharing.
But I've been especially watching Ken's Facebook posts, and I especially think he would like it.
I think so too. And
I don't think I am on your list, and I am not a member of your congregation, and I'm actually, I mean, I'm firm and like I'm kind of, I say I practice broad spirituality, and that's who I am, but I'm very much interested in, you know, like just very, very local sort of neighborhood, you know, like social justice humanitarian, projects. So if you guys are doing anything of the kind, where it's very, very practical, I'd like to get those emails if that's possible. And I wanted to say thank you for this group. I would have never gotten through this size of a book while working full time at the same time.
That's a monster book.
Someone telling me like next weekend 2 more chapters. So that made it possible for me.
And I really like the aspect of reading on our own, the lectures from Ted that filled in things that really weren't in the book, or disputing things that were in the book. And then the conversation, because that has, I think, made it a much more rich experience for everybody to have those different ways of learning and hearing and getting it, I think. So thank you, Katya. We'll definitely keep you in the loop. And I'm the pastor of the church, but I'm also a firm believer in inclusion. And I don't think you have to be a member of the church to be on the social justice ministry team. You do to chair it, but not to be on the team. So we could certainly include you in areas when discussions are going on around topics that I think you might be interested in. We can certainly loop you in. We're doing it on Zoom right now anyway. So you could certainly be a part of the meeting.
Yep.
Anne?
I have just a hope. I read the book, but I'm not really a fan of nonfiction, except for science, of course. So if anyone knows of a novel or a nonfiction book that might be meaningful for us to discuss.
Okay, yeah.
Is what I'm trying to suggest. A novel.
Well, and we can have a book club too. I mean, we have this study group, but then we could also have a book club like the former book club that was a non-reading book club when I got here, and it was just going to lunch.
I couldn't see.
A non-reading book club.
Just an
Yeah,
idea.
that's what they when I first got here, they invited me to go to the book club lunch. And it's like, oh, really? Well, what are we reading now? Oh, we're not reading anything anymore. It's just going to lunch. So I tagged them the non-reading book club.
But yeah, sometimes novels are a good way to get ideas across.
There was a Native book I read. I think the Native American was in California, and it was really powerful. But it was a novel, but somehow it must have been based on some personal experience. And I can't tell you the name. It was a bestseller a year or two ago, and the cover is orange. I'm rambling, but anyway, someone will know of a good book or novel. Just a little push.
Have you read Sumont Kids, the book of Longings? Have you read Sumont Kids' book, The Book of Longings? It's a novel.
Children of Blood and Bone is what Ryan's holding up. What's that about?
I'm going to stop the recording because I think we're going